Imagine you're at this ultra-exclusive VIP lounge. The music is loud, the drinks are flowing, and then, boom, the entire room goes ghost quiet. Why? Because Michael Jordan is currently inches away from Rich Paul's face, and he is absolutely not smiling. We aren't talking about a business-as-usual handshake here. MJ has his hand clamped on Rich's shoulder like he was about to put him through a wall, and the look on his face is the same one he had before he ended the Pistons season in '91. The GOAT finally reached his breaking point with the man who's been trying to attack his legacy for over a decade. Rich Paul was standing there, looking like he wanted to vanish, because his whiteboard logic and podcast talking points don't mean a thing when the actual god of basketball is breathing down his neck. And wait until you hear the crazy stuff Rich has been saying about MJ behind the scenes. From linking MJ to the crack epidemic to boldly saying MJ isn't the greatest player ever. Look, if you think the conversation around who the greatest NBA player of all time has been just about rings and stats, you are missing the entire clash that's been happening behind the scenes. There has been a systematic attempt by Klutch Sports to rewrite history before LeBron James officially walks away from the game. And honestly, it's getting desperate. To understand why Michael Jordan was basically ready to crash a Miami gala to confront Rich Paul, you have to look at the trash Rich has been dropping in our ears for years. It started with that Platinum Antlers take back in 2023. Rich sat there on a podcast and told us that LeBron's path was harder because he had to chase Jordan's shadow from high school.
But I just think LeBron's antlers is in platinum and Michael's may be in gold. Why? Because when you think about, he had to be compared to Mike. Who did Mike have to be compared to?
Talk about it.
Imagine the audacity of that. He's trying to gaslight you into thinking that the expectations that LeBron came with are a heavier burden than actually going out and dominating every single human being on a basketball court for 15 years. Or the idea that calling yourself the chosen one on a magazine cover is harder than fighting through the bad boy Pistons' literal assault every night. It's a corporate tactic. I mean, if you can't beat MJ's 6-0 record, you just try to make the record look easier to achieve. But it got way darker on January 6th, when Rich Paul went on the Max Kellerman podcast and dropped the most bizarre take I've ever heard. This guy actually brought out a whiteboard to try to explain why the Jordan brand is successful, and his conclusion was insane. He didn't credit MJ's 6 rings or his insane business knowledge. No, he credited the crack epidemic. I am not making this up. Rich claimed the legend of Jordan wasn't built on basketball brilliance, but because of the 80s and 90s street culture's obsession with status and narcotics.
These people had basically not even careers or high-paying jobs. They just had hustles. So now when you bring forth the crack epidemic, it created a revenue stream amongst a group of consumers that, number one, would have never had that dollar to spend.
He said, and I quote, "People didn't buy MJs because they wanted to be like Mike. They wanted to be like Max, who had the BMW and the cute girl."
And you used me as an example because I was sitting in front of you. You said, it's not that Michael Jordan did this, it's that the influencer who had the BMW or whatever, you said, like Max with the fly girl and the BMW. So you're saying
what
that
I was saying was
before
the
there
hustler.
He's literally calling every MJ fan shallow-minded. He's saying the most iconic athlete in human history was just a right place, right time guy who benefited from a social crisis. He even tried to say that Martin Lawrence and Will Smith did more for the shoes than Mike did, and to me, that was a direct shot at the soul of the Jordan brand. MJ has built a $4 billion empire on the idea of excellence, and Rich Paul is on a media tour telling the world it was actually just dope boy marketing and crack-era timing. This is the exact moment the silent version of Michael Jordan died. You don't get to insult a man's fans and his entire life's work just to boost your client's rep. And if you know MJ, you know 2 things he doesn't play with are his legacy and his fans, and Rich attacked both. See, Rich isn't just some agent, he's the architect of LeBron's brand, and he knows that to elevate his guy, he has to dismantle the greatest. That's why he's digging into the 80s to find excuses. He's out here arguing that MJ controlled the market because there was no social media to distract people. He literally used the word timing as a weapon, basically implying that if you put a prime LeBron in 1988, he'd be the one with the $4 billion brand. But that ignores the fact that MJ had to literally invent the concept of the global superstar. Before Mike, NBA players were just guys in short shorts. After him, they were gods. Rich tried to frame this as cultural synergy, but it's really just an attempt to devalue the work MJ put in to change the world. He even tried to say MJ's business game was only elite because he understood royalties, as if that somehow makes the legacy less impressive. No, it makes him smarter than everyone else, including the guy Rich represents today. Yeah, LeBron. However, here is where it gets actually manipulative. He went further and tried to push this narrative that MJ had it easy, and that MJ's legacy is a scam because he played before the 24/7 news cycle. Oh, but he didn't stop there. He also said that social media would have exposed MJ's bad games, which is ironic because Rich Paul, the man who literally manipulates the media in LeBron's favor, is complaining about MJ having it easier. What made it obvious that this was an intentional move was when Rich Paul tried to claim MJ was protected by critics like Peter Vexi, acting like the media in the 90s was a fan club. But anyone who was there knows that's a lie.
That's a whole nother thing that Mike never had to deal with because his hardest critic was probably Peter Vexi.
Yep. Straight up.
You see what I'm saying?
You see the pattern here? Every time Rich opens his mouth, he's planting a seed. If it isn't MJ was lucky with the era, it would be MJ was a product of the hood, or MJ had it easier. It's a slow drip poison meant to pollute the foundation of Michael Jordan's legend, so that when LeBron retires, the transition to him being the undisputed GOAT feels natural. But Michael Jordan spent his entire life spotting traps on the court, and he spotted this one from a mile away. So when MJ gripped that shoulder in Miami, he was essentially reminding Rich that you can buy the podcasts and the media, and you can bring as many whiteboards as you want, but you can't buy the feeling people had watching him in '98. And very soon, when we dig deeper into the actual numbers MJ had in that era, you're going to see that the truth is actually scarier than the myth. But if you think the confrontation at the charity was just a hallway argument, wait until you hear the full story of what went down and what MJ told him about the future of the Klutch empire. Insiders are saying MJ just pulled a move that might leave LeBron without a single ally in the league office. It all went down at a charity event hosted at an undisclosed VIP lounge in Miami. It was January, and the music was thumping so hard you could feel it in your teeth. The room was crawling with NBA legends and Hollywood A-listers. I'm talking the 1% of the 1%. But the second MJ stepped into Rich Paul's space, that corporate Hollywood shield absolutely shattered. Look, Rich Paul is used to being the most untouchable guy in the room. He's the architect, the guy who moves LeBron like a chess piece and hides behind PR statements. But MJ is the eye of the tiger. He's a predator who doesn't need a marketing team to tell you he's in charge. According to the insiders who were close enough to the situation, Michael didn't even raise his voice. He didn't have to. He stood there with that unlit cigar, looking down at Rich like he was back in Akron selling jerseys out of his trunk. MJ leaned in and dropped the line that supposedly sent a shockwave through the entire lounge. You can buy the media, you can buy the shoes, but you don't get to buy my history. With just one sentence, MJ dismissed everything Rich Paul has spent 15 years building. When MJ said that, Rich was reportedly standing there with a drink in his hand, looking like he wanted to vanish into the floorboards. He's used to dealing with GMs and owners who play by corporate rules, but Jordan doesn't play by those rules. Oh, and MJ wasn't done. He leaned in even closer and delivered the final blow. You don't get to rewrite my life because you can't sell yours. That was the ultimate Godfather move. It was the death blow to the entire Klutch strategy. MJ basically said, if LeBron's story was actually better than mine, you wouldn't have to spend every podcast trying to tear me down. And if we're being real, he wasn't lying. In the end, Jordan just let go of his shoulder, took a puff of his cigar, and walked away, like the king that he is. But if you think MJ stopped at just that, you don't know the black cat. While Rich was trying to recover his dignity, MJ was already making calls, and rumor has it he just pulled a move that's going to leave LeBron without a single ally in the league office before he even hits his retirement tour. And speaking of LeBron, look, if you think this was all just coming from Rich Paul's side, you're dead wrong. Because while Rich is the one out here with the whiteboards and the excuses, LeBron himself has been playing a much subtler, more passive-aggressive game for years. He won't say it to MJ's face, but he's been dropping these tiny jabs for a really long time. It became obvious after that 2016 Finals comeback. We all remember the clip from his More Than an Athlete series, where LeBron literally looked at the camera and called himself the greatest player of all time.
That one right there made me the greatest player of all time.
For
That's
so
what I
many
felt.
reasons.
Personally, that was such a childish and insecure move because Michael Jordan played 15 seasons, won 6 rings, and never once felt the need to tell a reporter, "Hey, by the way, I'm the GOAT." He just went out and took it. So, by explicitly crowning himself, he effectively tried to say Jordan was number 2. It reeks of insecurity, the kind of thing you only say when you know the world isn't convinced. And then there's the ghost comment. Back in a 2016 Sports Illustrated interview, LeBron said his biggest motivation was this ghost he was chasing, the ghost who played in Chicago. Now, on the surface, that sounds like motivation. But if you look deeper, calling MJ a ghost is the ultimate backhanded compliment. A ghost isn't a person, it's a haunt, a myth, a shadow that isn't really there. By framing MJ as a ghost, LeBron was trying to make Jordan's legacy feel like an old wives' tale, something that only exists because people choose to believe in it, rather than a reality that actually happened. It's a classic Klutch move, try to turn the 90s into a fairy tale era, so LeBron's 23 seasons feel more grounded in real basketball. We are definitely going to debunk that longevity talk real soon with the numbers to back it up. But if you want proof that Michael Jordan is seeing through every bit of this fake persona, just look at what happened to Kendrick Perkins. Big Perk was the ultimate Jordan brand guy. He was signed with them for years, getting boxes of fresh J's before they even hit the shelves. But the second he pivoted, switched sides, and started shouting that LeBron James was his undisputed GOAT, the boxes stopped. Perkins actually confirmed this on national TV in March 2025.
I used to get boxes in the mail all the time of the J's before they even hit the stores. I started my media career. As soon as I said that LeBron James was the GOAT, those boxes stopped coming.
See, Michael Jordan is not some detached retired billionaire chilling on a golf course. Nah, he's the ultimate competitor who takes it personally when the people he's feeding try to burn his house down. It's a message to the rest of the league. You can choose your side, but don't expect to wear the king's shoes while you're trying to take his crown. The funniest part of this whole saga is LeBron trying to play the "I'm just a fan" card. In his March 2025 interview on the Pat McAfee Show, LeBron admitted that he and MJ don't talk.
Who, me and Michael?
Jordan.
Yeah, we're a good spot. We don't talk.
He tried to spin it as being about his own focus on the craft, saying he hopes they'll speak more when he retires. But let's be real. MJ only talks to the guys he respects like Luka Doncic. If he isn't talking to LeBron, it's because he sees through the fake persona. MJ is the most untouchable figure in sports for a reason. He knows that if he opens the door to LeBron, it just gives the Klutch machine more content to use for their next documentary. Remember when we talked earlier about how Rich Paul is always mentioning LeBron's 23 seasons? Well, let's get into the real reason he is so desperate to sell us on the longevity. It's because when you actually look at a player's peak, when you look at what a human being is capable of at the absolute height of their powers, LeBron isn't just behind Jordan. He's not even in the same atmosphere. See, Rich Paul wants you to focus on the 23 seasons, the total points, and the accumulated stats. Why? Because the accumulation is the only place LeBron wins. But in the world of Michael Jordan, and really any self-respecting NBA player, we don't celebrate how long you stood on the court. We celebrate what you did to the opposing team standing across from you. Let's talk about 1988. In the history of basketball, this is what I personally like to call the year of the greatest. In a single season, Michael Jordan didn't just win the MVP, he won Defensive Player of the Year while leading the league in scoring with 35 points per game. For context, that means he was the best offensive player on the planet and the most terrifying defensive player at the exact same time. He led the league in steals at 3.16 steals per game and was swatting shots like a center. Now, compare that to LeBron. In 23 seasons, LeBron James has 0 DPOY awards. Nada. He spent over 2 decades trying to reach that peak once, and he couldn't do it. The closest he got was in 2013, when he famously lost to Marc Gasol. And look, Klutch has spent years trying to frame that as a snub, but the receipts say otherwise. Marc Gasol anchored the number defense in Memphis and had the advanced metrics to prove he was the anchor. And in just 15 seasons, MJ made the all-defensive first team 9 times. LeBron's only made it 5 times in 23 years. That's the difference between a guy who could play defense and a guy who lived to destroy your spirit on both ends. Don't even get me started on the scoring. MJ has 10 scoring titles in 11 full seasons with the Bulls. LeBron has 1 in 23 years. But here's the manipulative part. We'll get into how Rich Paul actually tries to make MJ's scoring look like a disadvantage. He's out here on podcasts trying to say that MJ's high usage and scoring obsession made it harder for his teammates. Really, Rich? Because last I checked, that disadvantage resulted in a perfect 6-for-6 finals record. Meanwhile, LeBron's so-called playmaking has led to 6 finals losses. But the most desperate move Klutch Sports pulled was the illegal defense narrative. LeBron loves to talk about how the 90s didn't have zone defense, implying that MJ just had cleared out lanes to the rim. Well, that's total nonsense. They want you to think the 90s were easier because of a rule book, while ignoring the fact that the Jordan rules existed. The Pistons' strategy for defense against MJ at that time was to literally break all the bones in his body till he couldn't play anymore. Imagine having Rick Mahorn's forearm in your chest, or Bill Laimbeer trying to take your head off every time you went for a layup. Back then, there weren't talks of spacing and freedom of movement like we have today, yet this dude had the guts to say MJ had it easier. Back then, illegal defense just meant you had to stay near your man, but hand-checking was legal. If you put a prime Michael Jordan in today's era, where you can't even breathe on a superstar without a whistle, he wouldn't just be a scoring champion, he'd be averaging 50 a night. Rich Paul tries to use the word timing to devalue the 90s, but the truth is the 90s was a war zone. The Riley-era Knicks and the bad boy Pistons were the most brutal teams you could ever face, but MJ didn't just survive that, he conquered it. And let's address the most pathetic talking point in the Klutch playbook, the idea that MJ quit in '93. They try to frame his retirement as a weakness or a lack of stamina compared to LeBron's unnecessary 23-year marathon. But that's because they don't understand the mindset of a winner. Michael Jordan didn't quit, he finished the game. He reached the summit, looked around, and realized there was nobody left to beat, and left on top in '93. He got bored, came back, and left on top again in '98, like it was his birthright. LeBron is currently stat-padding into his 40s, chasing a total points record. But Jordan didn't need 23 years to prove he was the greatest. He did it in 15. And as MJ reminded Rich Paul in that Miami lounge, you can stay in the league as long as you want, but do not disrespect the greatest player that ever stepped on the court. It's just that simple. Remember when we talked about Rich Paul trying to paint MJ's scoring as a disadvantage? Well, he's still out here on every podcast he can find, trying to box MJ into this one-dimensional corner. He'll look you in the eye and say, MJ was just a scorer, or he's just the guy you want for the last shot.
I said, yeah, if I'm starting a team, I'm taking LeBron number 1. I'm still taking LeBron number 1. And I would take MJ to take the last shot.
It's a slick way of saying Mike didn't have the IQ or the playmaking that LeBron has. But that's where the whiteboard logic fails and the actual records take over. Let's look at the 1991 NBA Finals. This was the ultimate passing of the torch moment. Jordan versus Magic Johnson. The narrative going in was exactly what Rich Paul is pushing today, that MJ was a selfish scorer. So what did the selfish MJ do? He went out and averaged 31.2 points, 11.4 assists, and 6.6 rebounds while shooting a mind-blowing 55.8% from the floor. To put that into perspective, he didn't just beat Magic. He out-assisted the greatest playmaker to ever live in his own finals. But Rich doesn't want to talk about the 11.4 assists per game. He'd rather double down with his lies and disrespect and say LeBron is the greatest to ever play just because he's played longer.
But we know who the best player ever is. His name is LeBron James.
But we see what's happening. Real NBA fans know that the 2025-2026 media cycle has felt more like a marketing campaign than a basketball season. There are rumors all over the league about clutch plants in major outlets like ESPN, the same names constantly pushing the longevity angle. They want you to believe that a cumulative total is the same thing as dominance, but you can't buy a legacy. That's why this Miami charity event changes everything. It marks the end of the passive-aggressive era where MJ would just smoke his cigar and ignore the noise, so I'll leave you with this. Who do you trust? Do you trust the man who went 6 for 6, never let a finals reach a Game 7, and dismantled every player in his path? Or do you trust an agent who needs a whiteboard and a full podcast tour to explain why his client is better? In the 90s, teams had to triple-team MJ on the court just to slow him down. In 2026, Rich Paul has to triple-team the media just to keep LeBron in the conversation.